About 3 days after this incident, I got a phone call from a boyhood friend of mine named Blackie. My mother and sister implored me not to meet him since they felt he had a great deal of influence over me in my younger years. He did. I just brushed it aside, saying something like I was 19 years old and that he didn't do my thinking for me. So I thought. I met him that night in a bar after not seeing him for about 5 years. He was only 2 years older than myself, but already looked like he was in his early 30s. I had a beer with him, and eventually he gave me the pitch. He had just come out of Bellevue after a 30-day drying up period from alcohol. I found out later that he was using drugs. Since they don't usually mix, I figured he had been kicking a habit, and he still looked strung out at the time. He went on to tell me that he was facing 2 charges for sale of heroin. What did you want to see me for, Blackie? I asked suspiciously, but still the sucker. Damn, Sully. We've been friends since we were kids. You're the only friend I got. When you were up there in Coxsackie, I wrote you. Didn't you get my letters? I even tried to get in, but they wouldn't let me in. Did you think I forgot about you? He asked, looking hurt that I would even think such a thing. I never got no letters, Blackie. I never heard nothing about you trying to visit. You know how they are, Sully, he said. He knew all my weak spots. Yeah, I guess so, I said, starting to go up on the defensive, feeling I owed him a great debt. What did you want from me, Blackie? I didn't want nothing. Sully, I just wanted you to come with me, he said. Go with you where? What for? I thought of my mother and sister and how hurt they could feel if they could see what I was allowing him to do. Puerto Rico, out west, anywhere. I'll get a lot of time if I stay in New York. You gotta go with me, Sully. I don't want to go by myself. This was the first time I'd ever seen the weak side of him, and I felt uncomfortable seeing him in this position. I ain't got no money, clothes, nothing. How are we going to travel anywhere, I finished. He laughed at this and waved it aside. Don't worry, he said. I got the bread. You're the same size as me. You could wear my clothes. I was really impressed. Little did I know the suit on his back was the only one he owned and that it was stolen. When did you want to leave, Blackie? I asked anxiously with visions of Texas, ranches, and rodeos dancing in my head. Tomorrow morning. Come over to my house and we'll leave from there, okay? I left without telling my mother, sister, or my girl, all of whom I loved dearly. I didn't want to leave, but I left. Who was I trying to hurt, them or myself? Was I trying to hurt them because they did not love me or because I was afraid to love them? There was no money. There was no fancy suits. He told me he had to put all the stuff in the lockers in the bus station and that everything was stolen. I knew this was bullshit, but I still went with him. I was the one who was really running away from myself. We hitchhiked from New York to California to Las Vegas and on to Cheyenne, Wyoming, and where we finally stopped. I hurt many people along the way, and it is a virtual nightmare to remember, no less describe. Cheyenne, Wyoming, 1958. We were picked up in Cheyenne because Blackie was almost a double for some guy wanted for bank jobs in Canada. When the FBI and sheriff's men converged on us, we were sitting in the Greyhound bus station. It was about 20 degrees below in November 1958, during one of the worst blizzards ever to hit Wyoming. Even the cattle froze to death standing up straight. When they snatched hold of me, I was sitting on a bench with a Smith & Wesson .38, a hammer, and a bread knife in a small airline bag. We were taken to the Cheyenne County Jail, and after they found out that Blackie wasn't the notorious bank robber they were looking for, they sent out for information on us. We were put in different bullpens. I was put in a pen that I thought was on the second floor since they brought me up a flight from where we were fingerprinted. Blackie remained downstairs. A single guard walked me down a corridor to my cell. We went through one door, unlocked, and another about 10 yards further away. As I stepped through this door, directly ahead of me, about 15 yards, was a big picture window without bars on it. But it was so dark out I couldn't see a thing. The cell was to my left as soon as I stepped through this door. We'll be taking you out again in about a half hour for questioning. You eat yet? He asked, locking the cell door. No, sir, I replied. All right. I'll try to get you something. I can't promise it, though. Thank you, officer, I said, and meant it. He left closing the door, the outer one too. As soon as I heard it close, I jumped on the bars like a monkey trying to see out the window, and still couldn't see a thing. Right below the windowsill was a steam radiator that jutted out from the wall. It was actually level with the windowsill, and the bottom of the sill was about 6 feet from the ground. Shit, with a running start, I could grab hold of that radiator, tuck my head on my chest, and go through the window, sailor style, with no hands at my sides. I gotta just get a good pull on that radiator, though, to get completely through it. I'd sure hate to get hung up halfway through. This has to be the second floor, I thought. So when I get clear of that window, I'll have enough time to straighten my body up and land on my feet. With all that snow out there, I can't hurt myself. All during the brief interrogation, my mind was on that window. When they started to slap me around, my mind was still on that window. I just got out only a month ago and wasn't ready for more time. In New York, you could get a pound, 5 years, for a gun charge. God knows what they get out here. Good, same thing. One guard, no handcuffs. This dude's pretty young, good shape too. No big belly, which is usually the trademark of New York City cops and detectives. He probably can move. I'll have to get a good jump. I walked down the narrow corridor with the guard right on my ass. He went through the first door and approached the second. As I reached for the doorknob, I took a deep breath and started pulling it open slowly. Then, in one quick motion, stepping inside on the run, slamming the door and eyeing the radiator as I burst toward the window. It felt good. I had gotten off quickly and had built up good enough speed for so short a distance. I hit the top of the radiator, grabbing with both hands, propelling my body into what I had thought was regular window glass. It was not. It was plate glass, the type used on cars. That was my first surprise. When my head hit the window, I was knocked half unconscious by the impact. I felt a great burning sensation as the sides of the window cut through my arms that were down against my sides, but I went completely through. My second dismaying surprise was to find out that I was not on the second floor, but the first, and the bottom of the windowsill was at ground level. And there wasn't enough snow on the ground because it was the front of the building and had just been shoveled. I must have slid along on the concrete on my face quite some ways because it took the skin off my forehead, nose, and chin almost to the bone, which took almost 2 years to heal up. Between the impact of that plate glass and riding that cement on my mug, I felt someone had hit me in the face with a flamethrower. I couldn't see with all the blood in my eyes, and I really wasn't conscious, but somehow managed to get to my feet and tried to run. What I actually was doing was staggering around in circles on the main street. If it hadn't been for the snow, which made the traffic crawl, I'd have really run into something. I heard the horns blaring and saw the lights, but didn't know what they were doing. Then I was being tackled and felt the handcuffs being snapped on the wrists before I passed out. I woke up in the hospital about 2 hours later, and my head wrapped like a mummy. I got stitches on my arms, hearing doctors and nurses whispering, "Poor kid, must have cracked up. He's definitely insane." After talking to a few psychiatrists and narrowly missing being sent to the funny farm, about 4 sheriff's men took me back to the county jail. They didn't have 4 guards with me for security. They were there to make sure I didn't try to kill myself again. They really believed this, and I wasn't about to say differently. They put me back in my cell. The only thing that appeared wrong with the window was that it had what looked to be a large, perfectly round bullet hole in it. The rest of the glass wasn't even cracked. How I ever went clearly through it, I'll never know. At 9:30 that morning, I went before the judge. The vagrancy charge was dismissed, and when he sentenced me for carrying a concealed weapon and gave me 22 days, I almost fainted. For 22 days, I almost killed myself. You were allowed to have guns out there. The only offense was that you couldn't conceal them. The feds took Blackie back to New York after the 3rd day. I didn't want to leave that warm jail, but they threw me out into the sub-zero Wyoming weather with 7 cents in my pocket, an old Army field jacket 5 sizes too big, a cowboy hat 2 sizes too big, and a pair of high-top work shoes size 11. I wear size 9. My whole face was one big scab, still oozing with pus. I must have been a fucked up mess. There were no mirrors in the bullpen, because when I stopped a few people to ask for a handout, they cringed away from me in horror. Even the blood bank refused my blood. I just couldn't get $1 anywhere. I was just on the verge of throwing a garbage can through a window. I seemed to have 2 choices: go back to that warm jail or freeze to death. I was only outside for about 15 minutes, and it was that frigid. I was really contemplating that garbage can when I happened to see a guy across the street pointing a finger at me. "Join now," the sign read. And I was ready to join anything. The Army, Navy, and Marines got a big kick out of me, but they said they weren't accepting hospital cases. The Marine recruiter said I looked like I just crawled back from a war zone and that I should go home for R&R. I wasn't about to leave the comfort of that recruiting office on my own free will, so I went out and sat on the top step of the steel staircase leading down the street. I was sitting there beginning to think really evil thoughts when some captain in the Army walked in. He was halfway up when he suddenly stopped still in his tracks. After a few minutes of staring at me in wonderment, he burst out laughing and couldn't stop. I really had enough this time. "What's so funny, mister?" I shouted at him. The laugh disappeared and he came up the steps, slowly looking in my eyes until they were level with his own. "What's wrong, kid?" he asked, and the way he asked made all the tiredness from my eyes disappear and the coldness in my brows vanish. "Nothing," I muttered weakly. "Were you trying to join up?" he asked. "Yeah," I said pitifully, "but they wouldn't take me." He smiled at me and said, "You've really messed up, kid. Do you think maybe you scared them?" "Yeah, I guess so," smiling myself now. "How old are you?" he asked. 19. "Ever been in trouble?" "No," I said instinctively, but too quickly. "Was it anything serious?" he questioned firmly. "Just a stolen car, but I was a youthful offender and they said it doesn't count." "Everything counts, kid. Everything." He was almost whispering now. "Why do you want to join?" I just shrugged my shoulders. I was going to lie, but I couldn't. "Cold out there, huh?" He smiled again, and I knew everything was going to be all right. He was the kind of guy I knew couldn't walk away from a person knowing the position he was leaving you in. "Yeah?" I grinned. "Well, come on. Let's go inside and see what we can do." This guy was really something, and he really went out of his way to take care of my needs. He let me take the test 2 times before I passed. He bought my bus ticket for Denver, where I would take 3 days of physicals, etc. He also gave me meal tickets and a personal letter to some guy in the Mayflower Hotel in Denver. When he was putting me on the bus, I was really choked up, and I didn't even know how to thank him because I didn't feel I could properly. "I really appreciate this, mister," I said, stumbling up the steps to the bus. "Forget it, kid. I'm glad I can help you out. You take care of yourself," he called after me. I waved back at him without looking because I knew I would cry. I passed my physicals and 3 days later was sent to Fort Carson, Colorado. During the course of calisthenics, I was unable to raise my right arm above my shoulder without a great deal of pain. I was sent to the infirmary. After x-rays, I was informed I had a broken shoulder, which I could have only gotten driving through the window of that jail. Damn! It was real sore, so I thought it was maybe a bad bruise. I never dreamed it could be busted. I blew about 4 weeks of basic training. When I was back in the groove, I had to recycle all over, but not in Fort Carson. I was sent to Fort Hood, Texas. In a matter of 3 weeks, I grew weary and bored with all the pompous, militaristic bullshit. But more, I just wanted to see my girl who I left without so much as a goodbye. Governor's Island, Stockade, 1959. This army shit was almost as bad as being in jail. It took me 3 days by bus to reach New York City. 2 more days before I was caught and put in the stockade on Governor's Island. Immediately upon arrival, it became a challenge. The prisoners in the stockade were used like flunkies for all the First Army brass officers on the island by washing their cars, windows, mowing their lawns, or whatever else their little women could find for you to do. I was going out of the stockade on these different details for about a week when I had a run-in with one of my MP guards. We had been doing some meaningless task outside one of the general's houses. This guy spotted a cigarette butt lying on the lawn. Obviously, it was bothering him very much because he signaled me out of about 20 guys. "Hey, Sullivan, come over here." He was sitting on a stone wall that marked the boundaries of the properties. "Yeah, what's happening?" I asked, approaching him. He pointed indifferently to the cigarette lying only a few feet from where he sat. "Get that butt and strip it. It looks bad," he said with the same indifference. I knew he couldn't possibly care about any feelings that I might have, or he wouldn't act this way, so what's the sense of arguing pettily with him? I simply ignored his order. "What?" He truly appeared stunned that any mortal man might dare defy him. After all, wasn't he a military policeman? "Are you disobeying an order, Sullivan?" He rose to his full gigantic stature of 5.5 feet, with his boots responsible for half of the 140 pounds he was carrying. "No." "Then pick up that butt like I ordered." He pointed again. "My back hurts, sir," I said sarcastically. "I can't bend over. I want to, but I just couldn't. It'd be too painful." I smiled nastily. He jumped up in front of me like he was going to rough me up. Then he had second thoughts and said huffily, "This is the last time you're coming out on a detail, Sullivan. From now on, you don't come out of the stockade. I'll see to that." He roared, looking very satisfied with the way he handled the situation. I wanted to tell him what an inconsequential moron he really was, but didn't want to push my luck. Well, anyway, I got a good look out of the whole island and pretty well mapped my plan for escape. It was early December and the river was ice cold already. If I could get out of the stockade some night and make it down to the dock, I could make it. There were always one of the Governor's Island ferries at the pier, which were not in use, and I could cut loose one of the life preservers. Brooklyn looked to be only about 200 or 300 yards away, and though I was a pretty good swimmer, I knew these waters had 3 or 4 different currents. Looking from the dock to my left, there was Manhattan and South Street, where the Staten Island ferry went out. To the extreme left was the Statue of Liberty. The stockade itself was a circular bastion dubbed Castle Williams. The walls were giant granite blocks, solid and about 4 feet thick. The bars were all as thick as the barrel of a baseball bat. The walls couldn't have been gotten through with anything short of a jackhammer. It could be gotten over, though, but this would be a wasted effort because of a lack of time. I spoke to a few friends of mine who had been in a couple of months and who knew the routine much better than I. They told me that the only one they knew who got outside the castle during the dark hours was the guy who worked in the kitchen. Every morning about 4:30, he wheeled the slop barrels across the compound. When he reached the heavy steel barrel gate, an MP would come out of the shack just outside the gate and let him through. I watched for about 8 consecutive mornings. It was always the same, give or take about 5 minutes. There were 2 MPs in the shack, not one. Through another friend, I got a job in the kitchen about 3 days later. I got pretty tight with the sergeant there, who was my friend's connection for booze, etc. I wanted that job in the potato room, and only one guy could be assigned to it. It was a nasty fucking job, cleaning out all those filthy slop pails and mountainous heaps of rotten potato peels, but it was my only sure way out. This guy that had the job was a known rat, and I didn't want to offer him money, booze, or cigarettes for for the job because I'd only raised suspicion. The creep looked like he was in perfect health and not about to get sick anytime soon. My friend had a good idea, which I turned down because the outcome would have been the loss of all of our jobs. I had no scruples about what my friend figured to do because the guy was a real piece of shit anyway. He rat on his own mother for a pack of butts. My friend Sammy said this guy cleaned all the potato cans in the potato room once a week. And to really get them clean, he had to use a steam hose. The room was so small that in a matter of minutes, it was impossible to see 3 feet in front of you. Sammy figured he can ease in there and pipe him, hit him in the head with a pipe, leaving the job open for me. When I told him no, he really felt hurt because he really liked the plan. Shit, why not? It'll work. He'll never see me, he wailed. I couldn't help but laugh. Sammy really got indignant. I know it'll work, I laughed. But when they can't find the guy that piped him, they'll just get rid of all of us. We're not indispensable, you know. They could get 25 guys in 10 minutes and teach them all of our jobs in 5. You know what I mean? You think they go for that, Sully, just because one guy gets his head cracked? I know they would, I said. So how are you going to get the job? I don't know. Just wait and hope the prick dies. Maybe the steam in there will kill him, who knows? Unbelievable, 3 days later, the guy was transferred out. I didn't care enough to ask where. All I knew was that he was gone, and I had no trouble getting the job, but I didn't envy the guy a bit. Those garbage cans were so rotten, I puked twice the first day. When I had to hose those cans, I'd step outside the room, fill my lungs, and dash back inside, hosing them down as quickly as possible. I'd have to repeat this process about 20 times, and by the time I'd finished, I was ready for bed. I thought of getting off the island by getting in the trunk of one of the officers' cars. But once the alert was out, which would be immediately, I couldn't possibly make it. All cars would be searched by the MPs, who had a station right on the dock, which was the only way off the island. I had to go in the water. It was the only way. No sense of waiting any longer. It was December, and as I walked across the dark, quiet compound early that morning, I felt the cold bite right to my bones. The icy winds were coming in off the ocean and could really get bad at times. Funny though, I had not thought about the coming winter until that day. I thought about 2 Spanish guys who took off from a work detail sometime in August and tried to swim across. I got the story from Sammy. No shit, Sully, he was saying with disbelief. These 2 guys were 3/4 of the way across towards Manhattan when they ran out of gas. That wasn't bad enough for them. You know what the stupid bastards did, Sully? Can you guess what? Sammy implored me to answer, his hands out in front of him, palms up, and his eyes closed dramatically. Sammy was a real winner. No, I couldn't help laughing. What did they do? Sammy opened his eyes, curled his lips in exasperation, as if they personally affronted him. I just waited. They turned around and tried to come back. My God, 3/4 of the way across, they're trying to come back. Shit. And they were only a few hundred yards away, and they drowned. He just looked at me, shaking his head in wonderment. They could have made it easily if they had not turned back, huh, Sammy? Yeah, Sully, easily, he said, quietly looking me right in the eye. You trying to tell me something, Sammy? I asked, moved by his deep emotion in his eyes, knowing the concern he felt. Yeah, he tried to laugh it off. I just told you. I was still seeing Sammy's eyes when I opened up the potato room and quickly stripped my clothes off, wondering just how cold the weather would be if I could take it. It took me 2 weeks, but I got to the point where I could stand my shower ice cold, forcing myself to stand under it without moving. After about 5 minutes, I would be completely numb, but still able to flex my muscles. Taking the 2 pounds of margarine I had stashed in the potato peeler, I began to rub my body down from my neck to the soles of my feet. After rubbing most of it on really good, I just spread the rest of it on for good luck. It It wasn't so bad while standing naked, but when I put my clothes back on, my skin crawled in disgust. I felt like a big pussy sore. I felt like a big pussy sore that had just been heavily salved and wrapped in gauze. I reached under the potato machine and pulled out a butcher knife. I had taken it the night before from the cabinet. It wouldn't be missed till the butchers came to work at about 8 o'clock. Ready, I thought, opening up the door slightly and staring across the dark, gloomy compound. I could see into both the sergeant and the MP's office and the MP shack outside the gate. Everything seemed normal. Nothing to make me feel they suspected anything. I opened the door completely and laughed silently at my own nervousness. Fuck them, I said loudly and rolled out of the potato room, moving slowly but noisily across the 40 yards I had to cover to reach the gate. Each one of these 4 cans of slop weighed about 300 pounds, so I really had to dig in and move them. The MP came out of the shack when he heard the noise, big key poised in his hand to open the gate. He was a country boy type, about the same age as myself, with fat, healthy red cheeks and a big 45 on his hip. Shit, he wasn't even going to see me, much less get a chance to shoot me. I was supposed to park the hand truck against the wall just outside the gate and come back in. They really hawked me with their hands resting on the flaps of their holsters. I never could understand that. By the time they unsnapped the flap over the gun and got it out, it was too late to do anything. Just like a guy getting his first piece of ass, trying to get his gun out through his fly before he came in his anxiety of the prey that before him. In both cases, it would make sense to be prepared before the perilous trials of life arrive. The gate swung open, and I rolled through, veering at once to the left, almost pinning the young MP to the wall. He was very alert and extremely quick, jumping and rolling away on the ground. I was off and running. The dry docks were on the other side of the island, almost 3/4 of a mile away. I shot across the airport, used by the brass. Only helicopters and light crafts could land here, cutting down on my speed in case I might need it later. As I approached the lighted area around the PX, I stopped running, but kept walking at a fast pace. I heard sirens or whistles being blown. I felt naked and very vulnerable as I walked the lighted area between the commissary, PX, and the dock. My chest was burning and my eyes straining, expecting to hear screeching tires or halt. Only about 20 more yards. I'm gonna make it. Only 10 more yards. I walked out of the glowing light into the darkness surrounding the docks. Only then did I look back, holding my breath so as not to hear my heart pounding as I listened. Smiling, I knew that the hardest part was yet to come. If I got caught or even shot in the water, it wouldn't be so bad. At least I had a chance to try. I walked silently across the dock. There were lights on in the wheelhouse of the ferry. I jumped up, grasping the wooden railing, pulling myself over and aboard. Lying quietly, I listened. There was no movement, and the only noise was the eerie, soft washing sounds of the water lapping against the boat and the great horns of the tugboats somewhere in the harbor. The sounds, the fresh, salty air, it was all so peaceful, so relaxing. I wanted to lie on the deck a while, but was brought back to the reality by the harsh bark-light orders from above, up along the sea wall that encircled the island. I crept silently across the deck, pulling the knife from my back. I cut loose the life preservers, which were tied to the railings. Hooking the preserver in my right arm, I stepped over the railing momentarily, looking down into the gray, brooding depths, and then springing as far out from the ferry as possible in an arching dive which sliced the water's icy surface. Everything stopped. My heart, my mind. The sudden shock almost made me lose consciousness. I wanted to get right out, right then. No cold shower was ever like this. I finally surfaced and tried to get my head together. I knew Brooklyn was only a short distance away on my right, but now, submerged in this excruciating water, it was hard to believe there was any such place as Brooklyn out in the darkness. I looked up at the sea hunters spread about 50 yards apart along the top of the wall, but facing inward toward the island, not ever dreaming that I could be in this water. I changed the preserver to my left arm and tried to crawl with my right. It was impossible. The strong current kept sucking me back to the left, and I was moving away fast. In desperation, I tried to lie on the top of the preserver so that I would have both arms free, but in doing so, I fell off to the side. My preserver was shot away from me, and in a matter of seconds was beyond my reach. I was mad and cursing myself for a damn fool, but with my anger came a new determination. Turning in the direction of what I believed to be Brooklyn, I put my face in the water and began stroking deep and strong. I felt the heavy weight of my combat boots as I pumped my feet steadily and rhythmically. I knew that as long as I could keep moving, the freezing water would not get me. After what must have been at least 15 minutes, I could feel my strength slowly ebbing from my body. As I continued swimming one slow stroke at a time, I knew that I was drifting at a fast pace and was absolutely unable to prevent it. I no longer had the strength to fight the tide. My shoulders began to knot up. Every muscle in my body was on fire. It's these goddamn boots. They feel like two anvils tied to my feet. If I could only get them off. It's too late for that now, so don't think about them. Just kick them once in a while to keep your legs up. Damn, I feel like I'm getting numb. Are you sure you're just tired? Is the water freezing you up slowly? More, Joe. More, man. Damn, I almost fell asleep. Is that possible? Take it easy, just one stroke at a time. Thump, thump, thump. What's that? What's going on? Thump, thump, thump. My God, my heart jumping froze in my chest. Thump, thump, thump. All the lights looked like a fur. It was a ferry. Whether it was Staten Island or the Governor's Island, I don't know. It didn't really matter which one it was. I knew I couldn't possibly swim out of its path. I was just too tired, and it was coming too fast for that. Joe, do something, anything, my mind screamed. Thump, thump, thump. Go underwater, now, go deep. No, wait. Let it get closer. Boom, boom, boom. Now, now, now. Throwing my head back, I pulled in all the air possible, then flipped forward, diving, threading, pumping my legs furiously. Oomph, my legs, the propellers will probably cut them off. Do ferries have propellers? Oomph, oomph. I gotta get up. Oomph. I can't take it no longer. I need air. I started coming up, putting my hands up over my head, thinking I could help protect my head. You're gonna die, Joe. You're gonna die. Splash. It's gone. I thought stupidly, being rolled about in the wake of choppy waves left behind by the ferry. I expected to hear the Coast Guard boat, figuring someone must have seen me and called the Coast Guard station. This thought only spurred me on to greater efforts. I had to get out of the water fast. I thought of what Sammy told me about those two Spanish boys. No, Sammy, I won't turn back. I've come too far, and I'm not thinking about the distance I've already covered either. How long have I been in the water now? An hour? 5 hours? I just couldn't imagine. I couldn't kick my feet at all anymore, and I could barely move my arms. Just when I was seriously beginning to doubt I had a chance and thinking how nice it would be just to stop this struggling, somebody turned a light on. I could see. It was hazy, a dock no more than 60 feet away. Strength! Where did it come from? I felt like a lion. The great exhilaration that surged through my body. I made it. I wanted to just leap from the water 50 feet away right onto the dock. I wanted to stand up straight with both fists clenched in the air in victory and scream across to the cold, defeated foe left behind. Look over here, you sons of bitches. Yeah, I would have laughed across. Look at me, you smug bastards. I beat you. Then I thought again, fuck all that. Just get up on the dock. You're not finished yet. You haven't even begun. Swimming to the dock itself, I tried to wrap my arm around one of the heavy pilings. Every time I'd lock my weary arms around it, they would slowly slide down to the water. The seaweed and muck made me feel like I was tackling a giant eel. Shit, don't drown now. I laughed and leaped up out of the water. I extended my right arm full length, trying to grasp the flat edge of the piling supporting the dock at its corners, and came away just short, few inches. I stopped trying for about 5 minutes, treading the water with as little motion as was needed to stay afloat, and regain some strength to try again. On the first try, my fingers caught, my body swinging unsteadily, half out of the water, then bringing my other arm up, gripping and steadying myself, and finally pulling my body up high enough to a point where I could hook the flat surface with my chin. That enabled me to get both my arms up on the dock and pull my body up onto the platform. I laid on the dock, blowing and wheezing like a fish out of water in its death throes. I opened my eyes and looked into the clear blue sky above me. It was completely daylight. Still lying on my back, I just rolled my head as I heard movement of what sounded to be some type of construction work. There was nothing happening other than some early birds getting on the job. I watched as 3 or 4 guys were throwing planks from about the 5th floor of a project that was going up about 100 yards away from where I lay. As I got to my feet, I started to walk away from the dock area. I figured that they must at least have MP cars out on patrol for insurance, in view of the possibility that I didn't get off the island. I walked faster now with the thought in mind, not even a damn subway around. People started to come out of the woodwork now, rushing for buses, etc. No subway. In my anxiety to get out of the immediate area, I never stopped to think of the picture I presented until the first person approached me on his way to work. He was an elderly man in his 60s and carrying a lunch bucket, obviously putting in his last years to retirement. He was about 10 yards away, walking toward me, when he suddenly stepped sideways and off into the gutter, looking at me as if I was some kind of freak. He wasn't really looking at me as much as he was looking at the deadly-looking butcher's knife. It was still tucked beneath my belt, to my surprise. Christ, no wonder he was frightened. What the hell did I look like? I know one thing. I gotta get off the streets now. Suppose that was a cop instead of that old man, then what? That old geezer is probably on the phone right now. I spotted a guy coming out of the diner across the street with what looked like a container in one hand and a bag in the other. I lopped across the street, keeping the only truck outside the diner between the two of us. As I was a few yards from the truck, I bent down quickly and looked underneath. He was coming this way. It was his truck. My mind spun furiously. I couldn't think. My hand went instinctively to the knife, pulling it out and behind me as the guy came around to the driver's side. A big bastard, I thought, as I stood frozen in the front of the cab of the truck. He stopped only a few feet from me, sensing trouble. His face, his eyes, nothing about him showed any sign of weakness. "What's up, kid?" he said almost offhandedly, the container and the bag still in front of him, and he never did bat an eye. "I need a ride, mister," I said in the same matter-of-fact voice with its shoddily veiled threat. "That ain't necessary, kid," he said softly, poking his chin out to indicate he knew I had some sort of weapon. He still held the container and bag, not trembling, nothing. This guy didn't have a nerve in his body. "All right," I said, putting the knife inside my shirt this time. "That's better." He smiled and shook his head. "Get in the cab." "Thanks, mister," I answered happily and wasted no time getting in there. He came in right behind me, handing me the bag and container as he climbed aboard. "There's some donuts in the bag. Drink some coffee, too. It's good and it's hot. You need it." "I'm all right," I started to protest. "Never mind the crap. Drink the coffee before you freeze to death," he ordered, his voice harsh but caring. What a rotten, sick feeling I had. I didn't like to think that I possibly could have hurt a guy like this. He leaned back in the seat, eyeing me as I sipped the steaming coffee. I was beginning to feel warm again. He'd also turned the heater on full blast. "Where'd you come from, kid? The island?" He pointed off toward the water. "Yeah," I mumbled, not looking at him. "You swam off there?" he said in amazement. "Yeah." "With those big-ass boots on?" He shook his head in amazement, laughing now. His humor was contagious. "Well, they didn't help matters any. I must have forgot to take them off." I smiled back at him. "Luckily, you didn't freeze your balls off." "How the hell did you stand it?" he questioned good-naturedly. "I didn't stand it. I just got numb after a while, I guess." His face became serious all of a sudden. I thought something was wrong. "Can I ask you a personal question, kid?" "I don't mean to be nosy," he said soberly. His quick change surprised me. "That's all right. I don't mind, mister. What is it?" "Why did you do such a thing? What made you take such a risk? Were things that bad?" he asked, his eyes seeming to be looking right through me. I was really tongue-tied. Why did I take such a risk? I mean, really, why? I just looked at him, feeling I owed him some kind of explanation. I didn't want to bullshit him, though as I have so many other people in the past. He was a real person, that kind I could respect, maybe even listen to. I don't know, mister." He just stared at me. "Really, I don't know," I said, dropping my eyes from his penetrating stare. I hated pity, and I didn't want that to start. "I believe you, kid," he said softly, patting my shoulder. "Where do you want to go?" He laughed again with suddenness and released the brakes and started the motor. "I'd like to get to East New York, Broadway Junction. Do you—" "Yep, we're on our way," he yelled jovially over the roar of the motor. Neither of us spoke the whole way. I thought it strange how people drew within themselves when confronted with something they can't understand. I would have liked to ask him what he was thinking. Maybe he could help me understand, but he looked so far away. He pulled the big trailer right outside the entrance to the subway. As I was about to get out, he mentioned me back, and coming out of his pocket with a roll of bills, he peeled off 2 tens, saying emotionally, "I wish you luck, kid. Next time I meet you in Manhattan, I hope the conditions are different." He stuck out his big hand, grasping mine till I thought it was surely broken. "Be good, kid, huh?" he whispered. "I will, mister. And, thanks," I offered, feeling embarrassed as I thought of how we met. I shot down the subway and onto the train, suffering under the contemptuous and pitying stares of the early morning riders. I ran the 6-block distance to my house and went in through the cellar door, which was always open. My brother Jerry was the only one awake. My sister Ellen had already gone to work. Damn, I needed a few dollars at least. Jerry didn't have any, but he got me clothes to wear and fixed me something to eat. I didn't waste any time in the house. They would be coming here any minute. "What happened, Joe?" my brother asked as he watched me wolf down the food. He was only about 13 at the time and really in awe of it all. "I escaped. I swam off the island." "Wow," he laughed. "Listen, Jerry, I gotta get out of here. If anybody comes, you haven't seen me, okay?" "Yeah, Joe, you know, I won't say anything." "Damn, I need some money." I was talking more to myself than him. "I haven't got any," he said, feeling hurt as if he let me down. "I know you don't, Jerry. What time does Ellen get home from work?" "Usually about 5 o'clock, Joe. But she don't have much." "I know. All I need is a few dollars. What train does she come home on, do you know?" "Oh, yeah," he was glad to help. "She gets off at Liberty Avenue." "Which way does she walk home?" I asked. "Gee, I'm not sure, Joe. I met her a few times and we always walked down Woodhaven Boulevard to Atlantic Avenue." "Thanks, Jerry. I gotta go. I'll see you, okay?" I loved this kid. He was so tough, but yet so wide openly honest. Nothing sneaky about him. My being the oldest brother, he always looked up to me. At times, I felt ashamed that he did because I was his idol to some degree, and I knew I was not worthy of trust and the love he placed in me. I never told him anything that I thought would be harmful to him. I also never gave him any constructive advice either. Just be tough, fight, don't ever let anybody walk over you. And he never did. He would have fought a gorilla as long as I was standing there, and beat him too. Why couldn't I have banged things better into his head? Like, go to school, Jerry, Learn, don't quit. This is the way I should have taught him to fight, but I didn't. Only because I was too young and foolish to know that this was the right way, the only way. I'm sorry, Jerry, for both of us, but we must keep striving ahead. It's not too late. It's never too late. I'll see you, Joe, he mumbled, looking very confused and worried about me. Don't worry, I'll be all right, I said, laughing and feigning like I was going to throw a punch. We used to have some real playful rumbles together. Even at 13, he was strong as a bull. Since he thought I was unbeatable, I always played the part, even under the worst conditions, like the time he charged me with his head down, catching me high in the middle of the chest. Instantly, upon contact, I thought I heard my bones crack. Holy Christ! He had me, flipping me to the ground. I just lay there for about 5 seconds, fighting unconsciousness, trying to draw air into my lungs. Jerry was still squeezing me in a headlock till I thought my eyes would pop out of my sockets like grapes from their skins. Come on, Joe, this ain't no fun. You always let me win, he moaned. Yeah, I laughed feebly. I could almost open my eyes now, which had been closed tightly in pain. The little bastard almost killed me, I thought. I still had a hard time breathing 3 months later and had pains in my chest for about a year. I left him standing there, as I did so many times before, feeling sorry for myself. I didn't belong in that house anyway.